I never thought that one night would turn my life upside down. Everything I knew about my family, my mother, my father, about myself, it all suddenly became fragile, like a spider's web, and crumbled to dust. But it didn't start with thunder or a storm. No, it started with silence. That heavy, oppressive silence that hangs in a house when it feels like the walls are hiding something. My name is Emrys, but everyone calls me Em. I had just turned 18, but I didn't feel like an adult. I felt lost. In my world, everything seemed too perfect. My parents, Mela and Ruel, were that couple everyone pointed to at parties saying, "Now that's a perfect marriage." Mela with her bright laugh and ability to make anyone feel important, and Ruel, quiet but reliable, who held our family together like an anchor holds a ship. I always wanted to be like them, but sometimes what looks perfect on the outside is crumbling within. That night I couldn't sleep. Homework was done, phone put away. I just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling a restlessness that wouldn't let me be. It felt like the air was thicker than usual, as if something in the house had changed, but I couldn't figure out what. The urge to shake off this feeling made me get up. I decided I just needed some water. Quietly descending the stairs, I tried not to make a sound. It was late, and the house felt foreign. In normal days, the dark corners of the house were cozy, but tonight they seemed deep and ominous. As I passed my parents' bedroom, I stopped. The door was slightly ajar, which was strange in itself. My parents always kept their door closed, especially at night. Then I heard it. At first it was just soft, indistinct sounds, but the longer I stood there, the more I understood. They were talking. No, not just talking. This was a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. Their voices were low, tense, filled with something I couldn't comprehend. My mind told me to leave, just turn around and go back to my room, but I couldn't. Something held me there, making me listen, making me look. I leaned in closer, and the angle of my gaze caught their silhouettes. What I saw had nothing to do with the love I had been taught. It was something else, something too personal, too raw. And standing there in the darkness, I couldn't decide what scared me more. The fact that I had invaded their private space, or that part of me couldn't look away. Mela turned. Her gaze lingered on the door for a moment, where I stood. My heart stopped. Had she seen me? I wasn't sure. Her face didn't change, and yet I felt like she knew. She knew I was standing there. She knew I shouldn't have seen what I just saw. I stepped back, but my feet felt like cotton. Step, another step. Then I ran. My feet thudded loudly on the stairs, my heart pounding in my ears, and my bedroom door closed with a sound that seemed to wake the whole house. I sat on the bed, feeling a wave of something I couldn't describe wash over me. Was it shame, fear, or something else I was afraid to name? I tried to convince myself that it was all a mistake, that I had misunderstood. But every tiny movement, every word, every expression, it all spun in my head again and again, too loud to ignore. And that's when I realized my family would never be the same. The next morning it looked like the previous night had never happened. Sunlight softly lit the kitchen where Mela was preparing breakfast, humming something to herself. Ruel was reading the newspaper, his glasses slightly askew on the tip of his nose. The air was filled with the scent of coffee and cinnamon. On any other day, this would have felt cozy, almost perfect. But today it all felt fake, like I was watching a badly acted play. I stood frozen at the kitchen doorway, not knowing how to enter a room that looked so normal. My feet felt heavy, and my heart was beating too fast. I couldn't figure out if I was afraid someone would talk about the night or, on the contrary, that no one would mention it. Em? Mela's voice was as soft and warm as always. She turned around, holding a plate of omelet. "You're standing there like a ghost. Are you okay?" Her gaze lingered on me a bit too long, and I felt a tightness in my chest. "Yeah, fine," I replied too quickly, too sharply. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. "Are you going to have breakfast?" She set the plate on the table and reached for her coffee cup. Her movements were smooth as always, but now each one seemed too deliberate, too calculated. I nodded, not taking my eyes off her hands. They moved just like they had last night when I saw her. Are you with us? Now it was Ruel's voice. His gaze flicked from me to Mela and back. You've been acting strange all day. Is everything okay? I nodded again, but I felt cornered from all sides. Just tired, I muttered, sitting down at the table and pretending to focus on my plate. The food on it looked unappetizing, like it was made of plastic. Mela sat across from me, her smile wide but her eyes too attentive. Are you sure you're okay? Do you want to talk? She tilted her head slightly, her hair sliding off her shoulder, revealing the line of her neck. I quickly looked away, feeling my face flush with heat. I said I'm fine, I snapped, trying not to look at her. All right, I won't push, she said, raising her hands in mock surrender. But there was that softness in her voice that was both soothing and unsettling. Ruel chuckled, hiding a smile behind his coffee cup. Leave the boy alone, Mela. Maybe he's just overstudied, or maybe he's thinking about some girl. Who is she? His voice was cheerful, but the words hit too close to what I was trying to forget. Nobody, I mumbled, barely holding back from getting up and leaving the table. Hey, relax, Ruel patted my shoulder. You know you can talk to us about anything. His words made a bitter smile twist on my lips. If only he knew. The day passed in a haze. I tried to focus on school, on friends, but every time my thoughts drifted back to the house, I felt my insides churn. Everything I saw, everything I heard, repeated in my head like a stuck record. When I got home, it was already dark outside. Mela was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, humming the same tune she had that morning. She seemed not to notice me coming in. I wanted to rush past her, go up to my room and lock the door, but she spoke. Can you help me with this? She nodded at a plate of tomatoes. Her voice was calm, but I felt a sweatiness in my palms. I have a lot of homework. I tried to excuse myself, but she was already coming closer. Just for 5 minutes, she insisted, smiling. Her hand lightly touched my shoulder, and I flinched. All right. I exhaled, though everything inside me screamed to refuse. We stood side by side, her shoulder almost touching mine. Her hands moved slowly, but I could feel the tension in her movements. She suddenly said, You saw something last night, didn't you? My brain froze. The words hit me like lightning. What? No, I started, but her gaze stopped me. It was soft, understanding, but also frightening. You can tell me, she whispered. Whatever it is, I want you to know it's okay. It's all okay. Her words were meant to be soothing, but they only stirred more anxiety within me. I didn't see anything, I quickly retorted, stepping back. I need to go to my room. I turned around, not waiting for her response, and ran upstairs, feeling her gaze on my back. When I closed the door, my hands were shaking. I sat on the bed trying to understand what she had meant. Did she know, or was she just guessing? And if she knew, why had she said it so calmly? That thought haunted me all evening, until I fell into a restless half-sleep, full of her words and those images I was trying to forget. I heard the knock on my bedroom door, but I pretended to be asleep. My heart was pounding like crazy. She knocked a second time softly, as if she didn't want to wake anyone. Mela's voice was soft, almost a whisper. Can I come in? I pretended not to hear. Maybe she would go away. She always went away if I stayed in my room long enough, but tonight was different. I heard the doorknob turn, and the door slowly open. She came in. I felt the space around me constrict. It seemed like the air had grown thicker. Mela closed the door behind her, as if afraid Ruel or Felicity might hear. The light from the hallway cast long shadows on the walls of my room. Are you still mad? She began, sitting on the edge of my bed. Her voice was as calm as always, but there was a caution in it. I didn't answer. I lay there, turned away, clutching the blanket like it could protect me. She continued, you know you can talk to me, right? Whatever happens, I'm always on your side. Her words cut through me like a knife. How could she say such things? How could she pretend to care about me after everything I had seen? I'm fine, I muttered, not even turning around. She sighed, and the sound was so deep, it felt like it seeped under my skin. Emrys. For the first time in a long time, she used my full name. You saw us that night, didn't you? I tensed, feeling like I had been struck by lightning. My mouth went dry. I wanted to say something, but the words stuck in my throat. You were there by the door, she continued, her voice growing softer. I saw you. The world around me went silent. She saw. She knew. All these days I had hoped she hadn't noticed, that I could bury it all deep inside me. But no, she knew. I didn't mean to, I blurted out, turning to face her. I didn't know. I was just getting water. My words stumbled, broke, turned into fragments of sentences. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't understand. It wasn't anger or regret. It was something else. It's okay, she said finally, reaching for my hand. You didn't do anything wrong. Her fingers were warm, soft, but the touch made me flinch. I wanted to pull away but couldn't. Something in her gaze held me in place. You don't need to feel guilty, she added, her voice almost soothing. I know you might have seen something unexpected, but it's not what you think. What am I supposed to think? I blurted out, finally finding the strength. I don't understand. What was that? Mela frowned, her gaze flickering away for a moment as if she was searching for words. It's hard to explain, she began, but I cut her off. Try. Her face softened, but it brought me no comfort. Your father and I... She paused as if testing my reaction. We have an unconventional relationship. We're in an open marriage. I blinked, not immediately understanding what she had just said. What do you mean? I asked, though my voice sounded hoarse and hollow. We love each other, she replied quickly, as if that was the most important thing to say first. But we also give each other the freedom to be with others. Her words hit me like a punch in the gut. I couldn't understand what she was saying. It felt like every sound in the room was amplified. The ticking of the clock, the rustling of fabric, even my own breathing. Are you serious? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Yes, she nodded. Her voice was as calm as if she was talking about the weather. It works for us. It doesn't mean we love each other any less or that our family's any less important. It's just part of our life. You think this is normal? I asked, not recognizing my own voice. You think all this is normal? She leaned closer. Her eyes searched mine. It can be hard to understand, Em, but believe me, it doesn't change how we love you and your sister. I felt something inside me crumble. All these years I had looked up to them as the perfect couple, and now it was all a lie. You're telling me this to make me feel better? I spat out. Because it's not working. Her face twitched, but she quickly regained her calm expression. I'm telling you this because you're an adult now, because I don't want you to think you did anything wrong. She placed her hand on my shoulder, and I immediately wanted to shake it off, but I stayed still. You're not at fault for what you saw. Her voice grew softer, almost a whisper. Sometimes we see things we weren't meant to see, but it's part of growing up. I turned away, feeling a hot, burning sensation rise in my chest. Leave me alone, I said, not looking at her. She hesitated for a moment, but then stood up. All right, she said, standing by the door. If you want to talk, I'm always here. When the door closed, I clutched my head, trying to piece together what had just happened. But the more I thought, the more tangled I became. Her words, her touches, her gaze. It all felt wrong, foreign, but too real to ignore. I couldn't understand what would happen next, but one thing I knew for sure, everything I thought about my family had been shattered. After that conversation with Mela, I tried to avoid her. Every time I heard her footsteps in the hallway or her voice from the kitchen, I tensed up. I found excuses not to sit with the family at the same table, not to spend time in the same room. I told myself it was the best way to cope, but the more I avoided her, the more she seemed closer. It started with little things, like seemingly accidental touches. Her hand lingered on my shoulder a bit too long. Her smile when she looked at me felt too personal. And her clothes. She no longer walked around the house in baggy sweatshirts and track pants. No, now it was fitted dresses, tops with deep necklines, light shorts. I tried not to notice. tried to look the other way, but it was impossible. She became the center of attention in any room she entered, and I couldn't understand if she was doing it on purpose or if it was just my imagination. It happened one evening when Ruel was late from work and Felicity was at a friend's. I was home alone with Mela. I had hoped to spend the whole evening in my room, but hunger drove me out. I cautiously went down to the kitchen, hoping she would be busy with something and wouldn't notice me. But she noticed. "Hungry?" Her voice sounded unexpectedly close, making me jump. I turned around. She was standing by the kitchen island, chopping vegetables, but her gaze was fixed on me. She smiled, but there was something strange in that smile. She looked too relaxed, too confident. "A little," I replied, opening the fridge and trying not to meet her eyes. "I'm just making a salad. Want me to make extra?" she offered, her voice soft, almost tender. "No need," I quickly replied, taking a bottle of water from the fridge. "I'll just grab something and go." You can't stay in your room all the time, can you?" she said, putting down the knife and turning to me. "We hardly talk lately." "I'm busy," I brushed her off, avoiding her gaze. She took a step closer, and I felt the air between us grow tense. "You know you can talk to me, right?" she said. "Whatever happened, I'm always on your side." Her words cut through me like a knife. How could she say such things? How could she pretend to care about me after everything I had seen? "I'm fine, really," I said, trying to sound confident. But she didn't back down. She stepped even closer, her hand lightly resting on my forearm. It was almost an innocent touch, but it made me freeze. "You look tense," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "Are you sure you're okay?" "Yes," I forced out, taking a step back. Her hand slid down, lingering on my wrist. I felt goosebumps run down my skin. This was wrong. All of this was wrong. But I couldn't make myself move. She looked at me, her eyes deep, searching. Her voice sounded so soft it felt like she was speaking thoughts rather than words. "You know you can tell me anything. Whatever you're feeling, it's okay." Those words stuck in my head. It's okay. I had heard them from her again and again, but each time they sounded more and more foreign. I felt a wave of anger rise within me, but it was quickly replaced by shame. "I need to go," I said sharply, pulling my hand away from her fingers and stepping back. She didn't move, just looked at me with a slight smile. "Of course," she said. "But remember, I'm always here if you need anything." In the following days, everything only got worse. I avoided her, but it seemed the more I tried to keep my distance, the more she found reasons to be around. She would come into my room without knocking, offer to help with something, sit next to me when I was watching TV. Every gesture, every look made me feel more and more cornered. I tried to convince myself it was just a coincidence, that I was imagining it all. But when her hand lingered on mine again, when her gaze stayed on my eyes a bit too long, I couldn't deny it anymore. One evening, as I sat in my room trying to distract myself with a game, I heard her voice outside my door. Are you asleep?" I didn't answer. She knocked again, but didn't come in. Instead, her voice came through the door. "I just wanted to say, you don't need to be afraid. Whatever you're feeling, it's okay." I heard her footsteps retreating down the hallway, and I felt a chill run down my spine. She knew what she was doing, and that was the scariest part. Every day became a torture. I didn't know how to make it stop. She wasn't doing anything I could directly point to, but every gesture, every look made me feel more and more helpless. And worst of all, I couldn't understand what she really wanted. My days and nights blended into one continuous cycle of anxiety and shame. I no longer felt safe in my own home, but I didn't know what to do, and that was the worst part. The house, which had always been my sanctuary, now felt like a cage. In every corner I saw reflections of those events I was trying to forget. The silence was no longer comforting. It only amplified the inner noise. Mela was everywhere. Her voice, her laughter, her movements. It all seemed too loud, too close. I didn't know what she was trying to prove with her presence, but every step she took felt like a test, as if she sensed my vulnerability and was testing how much more I could take. One evening I was sitting on the couch in the living room, buried in a book, though I couldn't focus on a single line. Ruel was at work, and Felicity was sleeping over at a friend's. Mela walked into the room silently, and I only noticed her when she sat down on the edge of the couch. "You've been in your own world lately," she said, her voice calm, but her eyes made me uneasy. "Do you want to talk?" I pretended not to hear her. I turned a page of the book without even glancing in her direction. "Emrys," her voice grew softer, almost a whisper. "I know what you're feeling. It's scary, isn't it? Everything you're going through right now. But you need to know, you're not alone." Her words pierced me. She spoke with such confidence, such calm, as if she understood my thoughts better than I did myself. "You don't know anything," I muttered, finally looking at her. "I know more than you think," she replied, leaning closer. Her gaze was heavy, deep, filled with something I couldn't decipher. "I just want you to know, it's okay, everything you're feeling, everything you're going through." The words "it's okay" made me cringe. I had heard them too many times, and each time they sounded more and more foreign. "You keep saying that," I said sharply. "Why? Why do you think you can explain everything away with those words?" She sighed, her hand slowly resting on my shoulder. I flinched but didn't pull away. "Because I know what it's like to be afraid of your feelings," she replied, her voice soft. "But fear is just a part of the journey. It shouldn't hold you back." I couldn't take it anymore. Everything I felt, anger, shame, confusion, exploded inside me. "You think all this is okay?" I burst out, standing up from the couch. "You think everything you're doing, everything you're saying, is okay?" Mela looked at me, her expression calm, but her eyes held a sadness. "I think you're making it more complicated than it needs to be," she said. "You need to learn to accept your feelings." "This is wrong," I shouted. "All of this is wrong, and you know it." She stood up, stepping closer. Her movements were slow but confident. She placed her hand on my cheek, and I felt my heart stop. She said, her voice so soft it made me shiver. "You're just afraid of what you don't understand." I stepped back, breaking that contact. Everything inside me screamed to leave, but my feet wouldn't move. She looked at me like she saw something I was trying to hide even from myself. "Stop!" I shouted, my chest heaving. "Just stop! You want me to believe all this is okay, but it's not. I can't." She took a step closer, her face a mix of concern and sadness. "You want to hate me, but it won't make it any easier," she said. "Sometimes we're afraid not of what's happening, but of what it means." Her words echoed in my mind like a haunting melody. I felt the world around me crumbling. Everything I knew, everything I believed in, no longer mattered. I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't. A feeling of helplessness washed over me like a wave. I don't remember how morning came. It felt like the night was endless, filled with anxious thoughts and sleeplessness. The sunlit room brought no warmth, only a deeper sense of exhaustion. The house was quiet. The silence was no longer a comfort. It felt like a ghost of everything that had happened. I stood in my room, packing my things into a bag. I needed to leave. Leave this house, this silence. Leave Mela. My heart was beating too fast. My hands were shaking, but I tried not to pay attention to it. I heard footsteps outside my door. They were slow and cautious. It was Mela. I knew it. She stopped in front of my door but didn't knock. She just stood there. The moment lasted an eternity, and finally I heard her footsteps retreating. I exhaled, feeling an invisible weight lift off my shoulders. It was a goodbye, even if it was silent. The first few weeks at college were strange. I surrounded myself with new people, new activities, trying to fill the void inside me. I thought if I kept myself busy, I could forget. But the memories of Mela came at night, when everything around me was still. Her voice, her touches, her gaze. It all came back to me like an unhealed wound. I started avoiding people. Every touch, every attempt to get close felt like a threat. I wanted to be normal, but I couldn't. The guilt was too strong. It took several months before I dared to go back home. It was Christmas, and I knew Ruel was expecting me. I saw his face when I walked into the house. He looked older, more tired than I remembered. "Good to see you, son," he said, hugging me. His embrace was strong, genuine, but I felt like an imposter. Me too, I replied, though different words were spinning in my head. Mela kept her distance. Her smile was as warm as always, but I saw something new in her eyes. She didn't try to talk to me alone, didn't make any ambiguous gestures, but her presence still hung heavily over me. That night I sat in my room looking out the window. The house was no longer a sanctuary, but it wasn't a cage either. It was a place where I had confronted something that changed me forever. I realized I couldn't rewrite the past, couldn't erase what had happened, but I could choose how to live going forward. Mela was not just my mother. She was the person who had shattered my world and then shown me how vulnerable I was. I understood that I was holding on to too much anger and guilt. It was eating me up inside, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her, but I understood that I needed to let it all go, or I would never be free. When I left, Mela came out to the porch to say goodbye. She just stood there silent, but her gaze was heavy. I nodded to her without saying a word. On the way back to college, I felt strange. It wasn't relief, but it was a lightness. I understood that the path forward would be difficult, but I was ready to take it. I knew the scars would remain, but I also knew I wouldn't let them define who I would become. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something that resembled hope.